Hello and welcome. You're watching India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. This is your show that gets you all the stories that matter if you're an Indian here or in any part of the world. As always, we start the show with headlines that are coming in. First up, Operation Mahadev. That's the justice for the Pahalgam terror attack victims. Sources say the 3 Pahalgam terrorists have been killed by the Indian Armed Forces. Thailand and Cambodia hold peace talks in Malaysia. Border artillery strikes early on Monday, even as it remains to be seen whether or not there is any potential of a peace finally coming through between the two warring sides. It's going to be almost a year for interim advisor Mohammad Yunus in office, and it seems that Bangladesh may announce polls coinciding with the first anniversary of Yunus's term, and polls could take place in February next year. US and EU reach an across-the-board agreement on tariffs. US and EU agree to a trade deal with 15% tariffs for EU exports. Remains to be seen what happens next in some of the other trade negotiations for the US. An Indian envoy's blunt reply to Russian oil question. He says, do we switch off our economy? Indian envoy was responding to repeated questions that keep coming in from the West about why is India buying Russian gas. The big story that we're tracking on the show, viewers, the terrorist hideout has been captured on camera. This is the big story that we are putting out right now on India Global, which is that the 3 terrorists who were responsible for the heinous Pahalgam terror attack that took 26 Indian lives have now been killed by Indian Armed Forces. This is Operation Mahadev. India had all along said that Operation Sindoor hasn't ended. It will not end till the time those responsible for Pahalgam terror attack will be brought to book. That has happened even as the government is debating and discussing Operation Sindoor in Parliament. This is an important update, viewers, that tells you that India will relentlessly continue to hunt for all those responsible for causing terror attack on Indian soil. Let's first listen in to what Defence Minister Rajnath Singh had to say when he rebutted opposition questions and replied to all those who were doubting India's intent with regard to Operation Sindoor. Listen in.
ऑपरेशन सिंदूर क्यों शुरू किया गया, इसकी जानकारी पहले भी दी गई है और आज भी मैंने सदन को दी है। अध्यक्ष महोदय, कभी कभी हमारे प्रतिपक्ष के लोग ये पूछते रहे हैं कि हमारे कितने विमान गिरे। मुझे लगता है उनका यह प्रश्न हमारी राष्ट्रीय जनभावनाओं का सही से प्रतिनिधित्व नहीं कर रहा है। मुझे लगता है उन्होंने एक बार भी हमसे यह नहीं पूछा कि हमारी सेनाओं ने दुश्मन के कितने विमान मारे गिराए। यदि उन्हें प्रश्न पूछना ही है अध्यक्ष महोदय, तो उनका प्रश्न यह होना चाहिए, क्या भारत ने आतंकवादी ठिकानों को तबाह किया? तो उसका उत्तर है हाँ। मैं विपक्ष के सम्मानित साथियों से कहना चाहता हूं कि आपको प्रश्न पूछना है तो यह प्रश्न पूछिए, क्या ऑपरेशन सिंदूर सफल रहा? तो उसका उत्तर है हाँ।
All right, let's get you an important voice on this. General G.G. Dwivedi, who's joining us on the broadcast. General Dwivedi, appreciate you joining us on India Global. Let me start by first asking you that justice for Pahalgam terror attack victims has happened on the day when the government is being asked those questions by the opposition. How do you read the fact that there is some closure that's coming in for the victims of the Pahalgam terror attack?
Well, Gaurie, firstly, thanks for having me on your show. I think this news comes as a great success for the Indian Armed Forces because these 3 terrorists who actually had committed the heinous crime. The Indian Armed Forces were after them, and it is so heartening that after 3 months, we have ultimately got them. And as the names are still being disclosed, one is Suleiman, Yasser, Hamza. What I want to say is that justice has been served. And that was so important because this crime of this kind that was committed in Pahalgam on 22nd April was one of the most heinous of its kind. And I think we should compliment armed forces that they have been at it for the last 3 months and finally they got them. This serves a very important message to the other terrorists that your days will be numbered. No matter if where you are, you will be caught and you will be killed. And also Operation Sindoor was another message to Pakistan that you stop this cross-border terrorism or else we'll strike you wherever you are. And that's the message even Prime Minister had given yesterday, that we'll hunt them down wherever they are. And I'm so glad that this justice has been served. And I'm sure it will assuage the feelings of those brave hearts who were killed during this heinous crime, during this heinous act. Gaurie.
Then, which brings me to ask you this, General Dwivedi, this comes even as repeated questions were being asked. Why is it that those terrorists are not being hunted? Why is it taking so long? This is the most befitting reply that has come in.
Absolutely, Gaurie, because the point is that terrorists are not very easy to hunt because they operate in the areas which are many times inaccessible. You have to build up the information. So it just cannot happen with the press of the button because I have operated extensively in these areas. It takes time and sometimes you may not even get them. But what is very heartening is that while we have taken time, we have got them and justice has been served. And this should be a very clear message across the spectrum that Indian Armed Forces, India as a nation, will give a befitting response to such like terrorist activities. And it's time that Pakistan stops its cross-border terrorism because otherwise Operation Sindoor is still on. And in case they don't mend their ways, then they are in for further punishment. Gaurie.
All right, we'll leave it there. General Dwivedi, thanks much for speaking to us on that big story. Well, viewers, the message is loud and clear from India that we will not stop till the time we ensure all perpetrators of a terrorist attack are brought to book. Viewers, I'm now turning attention to the other big story. Well, Thailand and Cambodia leaders have just concluded their truce talks in Malaysia. A border dispute which has been deadly has been continuing for 5 days now. And there's breaking news that's coming in that I want to quickly address on the broadcast. There's breaking news coming in right now, which is that there is an unconditional ceasefire that has been announced right now. That's the big breaking news that we have right now, which is that there is an immediate and unconditional ceasefire that has been announced by both sides. There, remember, this comes after 5 days of relentless border dispute that's going on and skirmishes which have taken lives on both sides. Let's get in first. Let's introduce our guest joining us on the broadcast, Michael Feller. He's joining us from Melbourne in Australia. But before I come to you, Michael, I want to quickly put out some of those big questions. As we were going into this broadcast, it seemed that whether or not there is any possibility of a peace actually happening. Let's put out some of those big questions. Will the US mediation help achieve peace? Remember, this is a ceasefire. We are talking about whether or not a possible peace formula can happen. Second quick question, who triggered this conflict? Both sides are saying they're not the ones who started this. How did it really start? Because this is a festering issue. It's a centuries-old issue. If you do not understand the core issue and you do not ensure that this doesn't happen again, there's a possibility of the same being repeated. Next, have both sides targeted civilian areas? Lastly, what will be the political ramifications of this in Thailand? Those are the big questions that we're asking. And Michael, the breaking news that we have right now for our viewers, there's a ceasefire in place. Your first thoughts on the fact that it seems that immediate mediation efforts by the global community is leading to some sort of a potential breakthrough. And we'll keep putting that breaking news on our screens right now. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, thank you. Good to be here. And I think the ceasefire was always likely to happen. The Cambodian side, which is militarily a lot weaker than the Thai army, was always going to seek a ceasefire. And when the United States threatened to withhold trade negotiations from Thailand, I think the Thai government had little choice but to agree. The problem for the Thai civilian government, however, is that a ceasefire which can be made to look weak by the military establishment could give some cause, if you will, for potentially a disruption of the democratic process, i.e. a military coup. That's been the worry over the last couple of months. We've seen the government, the civilian government in Thailand, under a lot of pressure. The current Prime Minister, she is, of course, suspended. And then this war breaks out mysteriously. So you can only wonder what's really going on here. Is it really about Thailand and Cambodia? Or is this domestic politics by other means?
Okay, so you are connecting the dots and taking it into a completely different direction. But before I come to that, the possible dynamics that could be at play in Thailand itself, I want to come and address, I want to first focus on the breaking news that is coming in right now, because at the end of the day, if there is a possibility of a truce, no matter how tenuous it is, to hold out, then at the end of the day, at least the dispute will ensure that lives are not lost. Right now, 33 people have lost their lives. In your assessment, do you expect this ceasefire to hold out, given the fact that the US administration has been very keen that it should stick?
On the balance of probabilities, I do. And I think that anything which is going on within Thailand will refocus to the domestic power struggle there. I think the situation on the Cambodian border, the violence didn't work for anybody except to perhaps distract from Thai domestic issues. It was senseless. This is an issue which has been going on for well over 100 years, this border dispute. There was no real rational reason for violence this year to break out, except one can assume as some kind of attempt to distract a domestic audience from something else. Because really, the International Court of Justice has adjudicated on this matter several times. The Thai and Cambodian states otherwise had a $5 billion trading relationship, which is not large in global terms, but for small economies is fairly significant. And of course, Thailand's economy depends on tourism. So having a war on your border is not a good look if you're trying to attract holidaymakers. Mm-hmm. So for many reasons, I think the ceasefire ultimately will hold.
You're right about the fact that this has larger implications for the Thai economy, more so given the fact that a very large part of it actually relies on tourism. India is also the third largest provider of tourism earnings, so to say, after China and Malaysia. But in terms of the dynamics, how it plays out from here, and we're going to connect with Amit Khanna as well to give us a sense of how things are looking on ground. But Michael, my final question to you is, while you are saying a lot to do with the Thai political dynamics that are playing out, that is likely to have an impact going forward as well, because the fluidity in Thai politics continues.
That's correct. And none of the fundamental issues which are causing tensions in Bangkok are going to be resolved by this ceasefire. In fact, it gives ground for many hardliners within the military to blame the civilian government, the civilian authorities, for being weak on national security. So it's really a delicate time for the civilian government there. No doubt they will be reaching out to ASEAN and the United States and others to try to shore up their authority. But Thailand has a history of coups every few years, and even in recent history, the current government's predecessors, Thaksin Shinawatra and his sister, they were both deposed by coups in 2006 and 2014 respectively. So it's definitely not out of the realms of possibility.
Okay.
It could happen.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Michael Feller joining us live from Australia to really decode that that big border dispute. But viewers, if you're tuning in right now, what is the latest update that's coming in? Breaking news that is coming on India Global right now is that Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to halt hostilities with immediate effect. This is after their peace talks took place in Malaysia, and this has been the deadliest border conflict in over a decade between Thailand and Cambodia. And this comes after a very clear outreach push from two sides, one being Malaysia. Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN, and the Malaysian Prime Minister, when he said and he spoke about peace coming in and he was the one who was mediating, it really put in a huge effort in terms of the possibility of some sort of a breakthrough. On the other side, then there was an outreach that came in from the Trump administration as well, because thousands of people have been displaced, and 33 is the count in terms of the body count on last update, which in fact has actually increased to 36. So in the wake of that, there was a clear outreach that came in from the Trump administration as well. So that's the latest that's coming in right now. We'll try and connect with somebody on ground, Amit Khanna, who is in Thailand, to give a sense of how this ceasefire is likely to pan out right now. This is an immediate ceasefire that's been put in place. This also marks the first formal dialogue that took place between the two sides since the clashes erupted from the 24th of July. It is regarding those temples. It's a Shiva temple where the both Buddhist countries have been fighting over. Let's get in Amit Khanna to tell us the latest that's happening on ground. Amit, it seems that there's been some sort of a breakthrough in peace talks and a ceasefire is in place with immediate effect.
Yes, it's a really a sense of relief amongst Ishan workers who work in Bangkok. I could see them on the streets celebrating because they were really concerned about their families. And this ceasefire meeting was held at the Malaysian Prime Minister's residence, where leaders from both sides were present.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly, that just going into these peace talks, you had the Trump administration making it very clear that they've got to figure this out. And in fact, in typical Trump style, the administration said, if you guys can't figure out, then there's no trade deal on the table.
That's correct. That's how the U.S. ambassador to Malaysia was also present. He was also probably the part of the peace talks.
Mm-hmm. But, this is not just about, as I said, Trump administration does end up saying several things and there's more than what meets the eye. But let me come back to the ceasefire per se. Now, what happens next? Those people who've been displaced, there are thousands on both sides who've been displaced. What happens there?
I think as of yesterday, the shelters had multiplied in the sense that from the day one. Now, as of yesterday, there were large shelters which came up. That means a lot of people were displaced and put into shelters. I think that process of de-escalation will start today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how soon will people then be able to go back to the border areas because there's been displacement on large scale on both sides?
So, if you understand, the government had issued an advisory asking people to stay away at least 130 kilometers away from the border, because that's how the rockets and the launchers have the reach.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks much, Amit, for decoding that for us. Amit Khanna joining us live from Bangkok to tell us the latest as far as what happens next after an immediate ceasefire has been announced between Thailand and Cambodia after 5 days of relentless border hostilities, which have taken and claimed 36 lives so far. So that's the big breaking news coming in on India Global, viewers, that after 5 days of border clashes, the two sides have agreed to a peace deal. On that note, a quick break. We return with more stories on the other side of India Global. Stay with us. Viewers, turning attention now to Bangladesh, where it seems that national elections are likely to be announced in the first week of August by the interim government, which, believe it or not, is actually going to complete 1 year in office. The announcement is likely to coincide with that anniversary. The chief advisor of the interim government, Mohammad Yunus, may announce the date through an address to the nation, is what many in the local media are indicating. Now, elections in Bangladesh to elect a government with a political mandate are likely to be held next year in February. Almost almost 18 months after what really was the premise of the interim government to actually be in place. Several political parties in Bangladesh have been demanding these elections early, and right now it's very clear that the interim government is unlikely to hold them anytime before February. Now, demands to hold a national election by December are unlikely to take place, but if they do happen, the announcement does happen, it essentially paves the way for some sort of a democratic transition to return for Bangladesh. All right, but staying with Bangladesh, there's another important story that's coming in, which is that Mohammad Yunus is preparing for something else. He's preparing to be part of the big China-led ASEAN grouping. To this end, Bangladesh has sought Malaysia's support for full ASEAN membership. Bangladesh hopes the move will bolster its geopolitical standing by allowing it to leverage its economic diplomacy for possibly greater standing in the entire region. But here is what the interim advisor is really looking to achieve: to get more aligned with the China-led multilateral economic partnerships. ASEAN may in fact be the stepping stone for RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership that's again led by China. Yunus is also hoping that entering into ASEAN would allow Bangladesh to address the long festering issue of Rohingyas, because that essentially means taking on Myanmar. It's a full ASEAN member, and nobody in ASEAN right now backs Bangladesh against Myanmar. But that repatriation is unlikely to happen simply because it's a very difficult issue to address and unlikely for Bangladesh to come out as a winner. Now, as Bangladesh gets more integrated with the China-led trading platforms, ASEAN first, and expectation being RCEP next, India needs to be very clear that it needs to keep its guard up as far as Bangladesh is concerned. All right, the other important story, Donald Trump has announced a trade deal with the EU to come into place after 4 months of very difficult negotiations between Washington and Brussels and avert a damaging transatlantic trade war. Imposing a 15% import tariff on most EU goods, half the threatened rate, the European Commission chief, Ursula von der Leyen, said we have a deal after a 40-minute meeting with Donald Trump at his golf resort in Scotland, where the US president is on holiday for the weekend. Under the agreement, the US will levy a 15% baseline tariff for most EU exports to the US, limiting a higher tariff. But the rate is higher than before Trump came to power, and a 50% tariff remains on steel exports, which is a setback for the industry. There was initial confusion over pharmaceuticals after Trump said the sector would possibly not be included. Trump called it a giant deal, while von der Leyen hailed it as a win for stability and predictability. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz welcomed the deal. Remember, Germany is the big industrial powerhouse of the EU, which has said that it backs the deal completely. Remains to be seen whether it will actually get the kind of economic benefits that both sides are really hoping for. I want to play out Donald Trump's bite in terms of what he felt about this trade deal. Listen in.
They are going to agree to invest into the United States $600 billion. All of the countries will be opened up to trade with the United States at zero tariff. We are agreeing that the tariff straight across for automobiles and everything else will be a straight across tariff of 15%. I think it's great that we made a deal today instead of playing games and maybe not making a deal at all. I think it's, I'm going to let you say, but I think it's the biggest deal ever made. Thank you very much.
All right, as we wrap things up on this edition of India Global, we leave you viewers with probably the most important piece of news that's coming in right now, the World Chess Final. It was going to be a title that only an Indian was supposed to win, and it looks like it's Divya Deshmukh who's trumping the seasoned Koneru Hampi there, and she will in fact now be the young Indian champion of the Federation of Indian Chess and the Chess World Cup. Thank you so much for watching this edition of India Global.